Yes.
If those guys are saying in Jude 6, or in Jude 6 reserved in the everlasting change under the darkness unto the judgment of the great day.
They evidently didn't receive any gospel, did they?
So we don't need to do it in the great white throne.
That's right. So they sure didn't receive any gospel if they heard it. Yes.
Are the giants down in Tartarus with fallen angels, or are they separate?
I don't know.
You indicated like the giants accepted, but the fallen
Yes.
angels are rejected.
I'll tell you why I said that. Because he said the angels which kept not the first estate are reserved in everlasting chains of darkness. So they had it. But those offspring of that thing would be a being that was half human and therefore subject to blood redemption, and yet half our space, and therefore partaker of the sin. Lord, you might get a body, it might be a body, I'll tell you what it might be. Did you ever hear folks say niggers don't have souls? Did you ever that said down? So some old folks down south still think that, or some of those say real rough southerners, you know, up there in Mississippi and Alabama. I've heard them say that. So man, a nigger don't have a soul, you know. Just being rough. And we know they do, but whenever you hear something like that, there's always something behind it. Like, did you ever hear this thing here, they missed the boat? Well, people still say that, they missed the boat. Well, who catches a boat these days? Don't you catch buses and planes and trains? Then probably in 5 people in this building never have to worry about missing the boat. A fishing boat, maybe. Going out. But when you say miss the boat, you mean Noah's Ark. I mean, you say it doesn't have enough sense to coming out of the range. Like that ball game this morning. We played in the rain this morning about 1. It was a blessing. Boy, the coolest game you ever played. And I enjoy that good rain. Just standing in it, boy, and just soaking it. Makes you feel good. And they say don't have enough sense coming out of the rain. But there are a lot of things you could say that could make less sense than that. But not if it was Noah's rain. Anybody didn't have enough sense to come in the ark and that rain drown. So wherever you find an expression, there's always something behind it. And those beings, if they were made, I said they'd probably be, I'm just guessing, they'd have a human body of flesh, like a man or woman, and they'd have a spirit inside, a ministering spirit from angels, and they'd have no soul. They'd be a walking container with a spirit inside it. And when you look into that thing, you wouldn't see any soul inside in the eyes. And that's the kind of man Judas was. He couldn't get saved. He didn't get saved. And he didn't go to hell. He went to another place, like the angels. Yes.
All right, 2 questions. Number 1, where are they now and where will they be?
You ask me questions I don't know, brother. For nearest information, see your nearest flying saucer. Yes.
Now, the way this, you're teaching this is that on Calvary, when Jesus died, he went into Abraham's bosom. And then from there, he went into the spirits and prison.
I'd say went there first and then to Abraham's bosom, then up.
Did he ever go into hell?
Yeah.
Or the other part?
I don't know.
His soul was not left in hell.
I'm sure he went through hell, yes.
All right. Then he went through where Lazarus was at.
Yeah.
But he went through there for a second.
Yeah,
Get to the
that's
prison,
right.
In prison and in there.
That's right.
In hell.
You can be safe on that. Now, you can be safe on that because he said he descended the lower parts of the earth and led captivity captive, see? You know he went to Abraham's bosom and took him out. You know that. You know he had to go through hell because he said his soul was not left in hell. You can be sure of that. But now this, see, you can't get a little far out. Yes. I'm sorry, I can't hear.
How do they accept it if they didn't have anything to accept it with? I mean, it looks like it.
Well, it says in 4:6, for this cause was the gospel preached to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh. That is, they had a special dispensation, so they'd be judged the same way we're judged. But they couldn't get it till they were dead. Yes.
It's like that thing you told us about that everybody at one time in their life had a chance to get saved or something.
Uh-huh.
And that what this is, that God, that was their chance right there?
Yeah, their chance there would be after they were dead. The indication being while they were alive, they couldn't do anything because they weren't human. Yes.
The places came down, were they stripped from this house?
Yeah, they sure were. He says, Psalm 82, I have said ye are gods, but you shall die as men, and fall like one of the princes. Yeah.
We keep talking, we get purgatory in here.
That's right. That's right. That's where he gets it from.
Out of this place of darkness, and the Bible refers to the bottom of the pit where the devil came. Chances are he came with angels.
Yeah. Chances are that bottomless pit is it, because that's where Judas went. When he went, and he's the angel of the bottomless pit. Revelation chapter 9. And that bottomless pit probably has an opening, and that opening will be south of the Dead Sea, or it'll be up there at that pole where Santa Claus comes from. Old Saint Nick. Did you ever hear him refer to the devil as Old Nick? That's one of the devil's names. Yeah.
Well, if you want to watch this, something was funny. Sorry, on television, and I said something about they saw the in hotel, they went over to church.
Christian married any better.
Holiday Inn, when we met on, they want to build a Holiday Inn there on one of the mountains.
Yeah.
And they said they can build them anywhere. They got the best knowledge in the country. They went over to the building, and they come back and they couldn't build it. And he said, well, I should have known better than send them over to the building, because the information they come up with was that the mountain was cracking in half.
What was that at?
And which mountain?
That's Mount of Olives.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And it split.
And he said that this property on it was all in the top.
Ain't seen nothing yet. 319. By which also he went. That's the advantage of having a Bible, knowing you're way ahead of history. You're way ahead. You know what's going to happen. 1 Peter 3:19, by which also he went to preach the spirits in prison. I wish I could take you any further, but I can't. That's as far as I can go. Whatever else there is there, I don't know what it is. I've got a note that says not one of them was converted. If they were, look at Revelation 14:6. Peter 3:19, by which also he went to preach the spirits in prison, which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah. Long suffering of God. The oldest man's life in the Bible measures the long suffering of God. Longest man that ever lived was Methuselah, who lived 969 years, and when God wants to show how patient he is, he has the longest man in the Bible is that long. And the days that the ark was preparing was in the days of Methuselah. When he died, the flood came the year after he died. And so God, for to show you his long suffering, he takes the oldest life that's ever lived. As indication that God will put up with a man 969 years. That's a long time. But once the long suffering of God, that's one of God's greatest attributes. Turn to Deuteronomy 34. And that's one of the fruits of love in 1 Corinthians 13, long suffering. Come to Deuteronomy, and I beg your pardon, Exodus. It isn't Deuteronomy. Make it Exodus 34, Exodus 34. That's one of the attributes of charity in 1 Corinthians 13. Long suffering. It means to put up for something, put up with it, put up with it, put up with it. Is that one of the fruits of the Spirit? There's 9 of them. Love, joy, long suffering is one of them. All right, Exodus. Then that's one thing one thing about the Holy Spirit. If you're filled with the Holy Spirit, to have the Holy Spirit, that's there's something about there ought to be something in you that's like God that way. That's characteristic of God. And if the Holy Spirit's in you, then it ought to be characteristic of you. Exodus 34:6. And the Lord passed by before him, that's Moses, proclaimed, the Lord God. Then he gives his attributes. Merciful, number one. Isn't that something? That's the first thing. And brother, if it weren't for that, we'd all be dead. That fellow hit me down there in the car, about 4 weeks ago over there, and smacked him in the car, and he got out, and he took one look, and he said, well, I guess we pretty well know whose fault it is. And this fellow was way in the wrong, and I said, well, that's where it goes, and he said, well, I'm sorry I messed up your new car. I said, well, that's all right, the Lord gave it to me. And he said, no, Lord, no. He said, you earned it. You earned it. And I said, no, I didn't. The Lord gave it to me. And he said, no. He said, you deserve it. You deserve it. And I said, man, well, if God gave us everything we deserve, we'd be in hell, wouldn't we? He said, oh, yeah. Done hit the preacher. 6, the Lord God's merciful. That's the first thing. And gracious. That is, give you things you don't deserve. That's the second thing. All right, the first thing about him is he doesn't give you all the punishments you ought to have. And the second thing about him is he gives you good things you didn't earn. And the third thing about him is he puts up with you. And those are his attributes. And you ever stop and think about this? I never did it just now looking at it. But it says, I just have to think about, look at the Trinity in that thing. God the Father is merciful, God the Son is gracious, and the fruit of the Spirit is long-suffering. Is that thing? All right, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 20. Which sometime was disobedient, when once the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah. Long-suffering of God. Now Christ suffered, verse 18, but God has been suffering for centuries. Christ suffered once, verse 18, as a vicarious blood atonement in the flesh, but God hath suffered ever since he made man. The Bible says in Genesis 6, it grieved him at his heart. And boy, that long suffering of God gives out, like they say out in the world, Katie barred the door. And that means when God finally gets through putting up, boy, you ain't seen nothing. And I often think about it. I read a lot of stuff I guess a lot of people don't read. I don't care about novels at all. I read just eyewitness accounts of different things. I have in my house one account of Auschwitz by a doctor that was there, one account of Auschwitz by a prisoner that got out, one account by Treblinka of a prisoner who endured the whole thing, one account of Buchenwald by an intern who stayed through the whole thing, and those are accounts of concentration camps in detail. And you know why I like to read those things? I like to read those things and think about my Father that saved me and that sees everything in this earth, looked down and saw that whole thing, see, and let it happen, and held back, see. And the more you read that thing and that thing gets a hold of you, the more you see what God has seen in this earth that would provoke him just to wipe the whole thing out in 15 seconds. And the longer you see that, the more you appreciate your Lord. That's one of those things I tell about knowing God. I keep talking about that, knowing God. Well, you don't get to know him personally. You grasp some of that thing right there, see. You can't really appreciate it just in your own life. I mean, you know the Lord put up a lot of foolishness from you. You know that, see. And I know it about me. But that ain't the half of it. You get reading those accounts of those concentration camps where his chosen people are getting treated like that. And the Lord seeing that thing and let that thing go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I mean, mothers and children and daddies are losing their mind and killing each other and going stark raving mad and on and on and on. And God's seen 6,000 years of that. And folks, I tell you, when he finally cuts loose, it's going to be around her. And I'm glad I'm on the right side. When once the long suffering of God waited the days of Noah while the ark was a-preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, I gave you all this morning for those few fellows working, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. A good candlelight verse. Saved by water. The like figure whereunto even baptism doth also now save us. And the Campbellite will always stop right there. Baptism doth also now save us, but it doesn't say that. It says the like figure whereunto even baptism doth also now save us. Negative, what isn't it? It's not the putting away of the filth of the flesh. What is it? It's the answer of a good conscience toward God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is gone into heaven and is in the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers being made subject unto him. Yes.
Then this is water baptism?
It's water. You can't make anything else. That's water. Now, Bullinger, in order to get rid of that, Bullinger and Stammen O'Hare don't believe in water baptism. And in order to get rid of that, they say this is a Jewish Christian epistle written to Jews and doesn't come under the Pauline epistles. And they go further and say that the figure there is saying that they say that the baptism there in verse 21 is saving baptism, of which the other was a figure. Noah being saved in the ark is a figure of the real baptism that saved you. Bullinger O'Hare will read it like this, 20, which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited the days of Noah, while the ark, a figure of your salvation, was preparing, wherein few that is 8 souls were saved by the ark, type of Christ. The like figure, the ark is a figure of the saving baptism that now saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I've always found trouble in coming to that, and E.C. Moore and I are going round and round by the hour. But I asked Brother E.C. Moore to come down and teach Romans next year out for school, and he's coming down and going to teach it. But he came to me in deep repentance about 3 weeks ago and confessed that maybe I shouldn't hire him because he was not a good Baptist. And wanted to know why, and he said because he didn't believe that baptism in Romans 6 was water baptism, was spirit baptism. I said, well, I believe that too. And he said, well, you know how I feel about baptism, you know. I said, well, all right. So you can get through Romans without getting hung up on that. And he said, what if they get asked me questions? I said, you'll have to be prepared to answer, brother. A good teacher should be able to answer. And he said, well, all right, you take those conditions? I said, sure. And I've never been dogmatic about that thing. I don't think you have to be baptized to have fellowship with Christians. Now, I think you have to be baptized to have membership in a local Baptist church, but that isn't fellowship. I have fellowship with people who aren't immersed. I think one of the students here isn't immersed, come to think of it. I was about 40 miles. I think one of them didn't. Yes. Sir? No, he sure didn't. That makes more complications. When he says 8 souls were saved by water, he means they didn't get in it. So the ark can't be a type of the salvation there because the Holy Spirit puts you into the ark, brother. So no, that won't get it.
Now, how does that water, how does that stream go?
By means of, I'd say this. I say this from the Psalms. When Christ get ready to die on the cross, he says, are you able to be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? Referring to dying on the cross. And when he says that, he's talking about a baptism of suffering. Well, that baptism of suffering is found throughout the Old Testament as drowning. And go back to Psalms, and I'll try to draw it out for you and tell you what I think it means. I don't have these marked either. I want that verse says, all thy billows and waves are gone over me. The wrath of God lieth on me, I'm cast in the deep. Like Jonah. Let's see.
Psalm 18, verse 4.
What?
Psalm 18, 4.
All right. The sorrows of death compassed me, the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. Well, that might be figurative. Floods of ungodly men. 42:7. 42:7. Yeah. Deep call upon the deep at the noise of thy waterspouts. All thy waves and thy billows are gone over me. Next reference, Psalm 88, verse 5 to 7. Psalm 88, verse 5 to 7. Free among the dead, like the slain in the grave, will not remember this no more. They are cut off from thy hand. Thou hast laid me in the lowest pit, in darkness, in the deeps. In the deeps. Thy wrath lieth hard upon me. Thou hast afflicted me with all thy waves. See that? The wrath of God is like waves sent over a man to drown him. Look at 17. Psalm 88, 17. They came round about me daily like water. They compassed me about together. What is it? 16. Thy fierce wrath goeth over me. Now, when he talks about the wrath of God going over a man, that's the picture. And that picture is so strong in the Bible that it probably happened before Genesis 1:2. In Genesis 1:2, he speaks about the earth being overflowed with water and perishing. So I've got that last chart down there. I've got water up there, and then like the earth came down through it to get where it is. Then he says in Genesis 6, he drowned out the world, and here are all these people lying down here dead at the bottom of the mountains and all over the mountains, and the wrath of God is on them, and Noah is saved by that. The wrath of God is poured out on them instead of him. And when I see that, I see Christ dying on the cross, and the wrath of God going over him, and he said, "Are you able to be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with?" So when I see that, I see water as a figure of my salvation, Christ. The figure is that Christ drowns under God's wrath, and when the Holy Spirit puts me into Christ, I take the same place. And if I want to show that to the world, I go down the pool and go under and come back up. Yes.
That's what it did also.
Sir?
They didn't come back up though.
Yeah, but Christ did.
But how the water saved Noah?
Well, I think only in the sense that the wrath of God fell on them instead of him. Or the only way, that's the way you can make it.
It's like a thing Corinthians were saved by fire, or things were saved and so is by fire. Where the fire really...
Yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah, that's a good cross-reference. Yeah, that's real good. Yeah, he should be saved, so is by fire. Fire never touches him. Yeah, that would be like, yeah.
Could you say, sin was on the earth and the water carried him above?
Sir?
The sin was on the earth.
Yeah.
The water carried him above. How was the water coming?
Oh, from the earth. Yeah, that's the point. That's the thought too. He said the sin was on the earth. It was the ground God cursed and drowned it out, and it was the water that raised Noah up so he wouldn't be on the ground where the curse is. Yeah.
Spirit's like air, and like the ark, it's like air. It's fluid up. If we have the Spirit, we're fluid up. We got the Spirit of God in us. We can't think.
We're floating. All right, yeah.
Now, in verse 21, it says the light figure. What's the light figure? The 8 souls getting saved by water?
No, looks to me like it's water. The antecedent is water. Saved by water, the like figure. Whereunto even baptism doth also now save us, but then correction, and it can't be spirit baptism, because he says this baptism is not the putting away of the filth of the flesh, and spirit baptism is. It cuts you loose from the flesh. But the answer of a good conscience, that isn't spirit baptism. That's not the answer of a good conscience. The answer of a good conscience is something you do when your conscience gets right.
What about the last?
By the resurrection of Jesus Christ, I said the like figure wherein even baptism all up now say that by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, I'd say that real baptism puts us into Christ resurrected. That saves us. Yes.
Why is that in parentheses? Not the putting away the...
Because it's just good English, put in parentheses. That's good English.
No, don't another Bible put in parentheses what they don't...
No, italics.
Oh,
Italics. Yeah.
Is this the baptism of the Sabbath in that this was mentioned? Is this water baptism?
That's water baptism. That's the candlelight's favorite verse. Baptism doth also now save us.
Is this before people got right in it? Before everything straightened out?
That's when he got everything straightened out. So late days. What I give you for the day of that writing? About 58? 60, yeah, that's 23, that's 27 years later.
How does that? Actually, the baptism, the fall, and so now save it. If that water baptism.
Just say finish it. Finish it. So you didn't finish it. So it's a right figure. It's a figure. I'll tell you what one fellow said. He said, you wouldn't come up to a picture of your girl on the wall and say, hello, daughter, to a picture. He said, water baptism is a figure of the baptism that saves you. And he says, a picture is not the same thing as a person. You don't come up to your picture, your daughter on the wall, and say, hello, daughter, how are you today? It's just a picture. And the trouble with the candlelight is he can't understand that. This fellow said, get born again and you will. The candlelight. Candlelight said, I can't understand that. And if you get born again, you understand that. Yes.
Can they use this verse to prove that you have to get baptized to answer good conscience toward God?
Yeah.
Say that's obedience?
Yeah.
And that's the first part of salvation. It doesn't really save you.
Yeah.
Not going away from
You can use it for all kinds of things. I just leave it like it is. I said, it's the answer of a good conscience. When you get your conscience good, you answer God and say, I'm all right, go down and come up. Other ways you can answer God with a good conscience too. You start praying. I don't think baptism is any more essential than soul winning. Or Bible study. That makes me a heretic. I'm not a good Baptist. A good Baptist wouldn't. He'd say he'd say, baptism is not essential for salvation, but baptism is essential for obedience. Well, forgiving your enemies and praying and reading the Bible and witnessing and passing out tracts and doing your works and writing letters and washing your dishes is essential for obedience. Brother, that old idea that just one ceremony is essential for obedience, you let the rest go, that isn't the Bible teaching. Yeah.
I'll make sure I understand. Where it says the lack.
We forgot about all that we can, brother.
This is important.
Oh, go ahead.
Because no matter what it says, it still says it's now saved. That's what goes now. No matter what it is, it still says it's now saved. Now, does that mean that baptism, where it says the last three words in baptism, does that mean the spirit baptism now saves us? Or is that water baptism now? I mean, that says it's going to be
I'd say that water baptism is a figure of the baptism that saves.
Yeah. Yeah, but is that what it says in the first two lines?
The like figure.
Water or spirit?
The like figure saved the water, literal water in the previous verse.
So it saves.
No. It's a figure of the baptism that saves.
Yeah, I can see that. I understand. But I'm afraid about it from the town, but I have to my friend.
You went into trouble with him? Just say, why do you keep leaving out those first three words? He'll leave them out every time.
Yeah, this guy, this guy. What do you say? It still says it's saved. That's why you just go ahead.
He said it doesn't say it's saved.
Well, it says baptism, that's also now saved.
He doesn't say that at all.
Well, that's what he says.
What? Making you say, read it the way it says it. Don't tell me what you think it says. What does it say?
Yeah, I can do that.
That's what to do. Just hold them right flat to it. And hold it to it. 22, who is gone into heaven and is on the right hand of God. Angels, there it goes again. Looks like they're all tied up in that thing. Angels, authorities, and powers being made subject unto him. So that thing back there in 20 had something to do with those angels. I don't know what. It had something to do with them. All right, 4:1. For as much then as Christ hath suffered for... Oh, where are we? What did we begin, 7:30?
Yeah.
All right, we'll take a break right there. Beginning of the chapter. Brother Dignam, give us some prayer. All right, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1. For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us. Notice how many times that word suffered keeps coming in. For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us. Back up at 3:18. Christ also hath once suffered. 4:1. For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh. All right, back up at verse 18, the previous chapter. Put to death in the flesh. For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourself likewise with the same mind. That's like Philippians 2. Let this mind be in you, which is in Christ. For he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin. And it's kind of a misleading wording. I don't know how you can word it any better. it seems implied the person has suffered, they've quit sinning. But the meaning there is, if the suffering is evidence that you turn from sin. And to get that interpretation, look at verse 2 and 3 and 4. And notice the suffering for the Christian in 2, 3, and 4 is the suffering you're going to get for turning from sin. So when he says, he that has suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, he's saying the fact that you're suffering for these things shows that you've quit some things. Otherwise you wouldn't be suffering for it. This world has never been a friend of real holiness. And never will be. There's an old song that says, how does it go? Am I a soldier of the cross, the follower of the Lamb, and should I dare fear on his cause, or blush to speak his name? Must I be carried to the skies and flowery beds of ease, for others fought to win the prize, say everybody sees? Are there no foes for me to fight? Must I not stem the flood? Is this vile world a friend of grace to help me on to God? And just as sure as you quit anything and try to live right, you're going to be a target. You're going to be a target. 2 Timothy chapter 3 says, all they that live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. He that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Sometimes you suffer yourself when you quit. I imagine many of you folks know what it's like to smoke for a long time. If anybody smoked for years and quits, boy, let me tell you, they suffer. They really do. I mean, they hurt. And the same way with drinking. A lot of folks never tempted to drink, can't understand it, especially raised in a Christian home. But a person that's drunk all the life and their body's adjusted to the alcohol, when they quit, boy, don't you think they don't suffer? They do. Real, sure enough, AA quitting all but just like for just about an hour or two every day for about 3 months. It's just like somebody sticking you with about 3,000 pins and needles all over your body. And he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. And when you quit, they're going to get on you. Now you can hang around with Christians so long you forget that, don't you? But do you remember how it was when you got saved? Now go back there when you got saved, just remember some things you quit that you were supposed to do and how your old buddies looked at you. I'll never forget when I first got saved, went back up and witnessed my mother and daddy up in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And that afternoon was a bright, sunshiny afternoon. They all wanted to go down to the beach. And I'd just been saved about a month. And I said, no, I'm not going down there. Because that's a public beach, everybody was all together. And they couldn't understand that. I'd been a lifeguard in those beaches for 4 years. And they began to kind of quiz around, maybe he's off his rocker, maybe he's lost his mind, And my mother said, well, they said, you trying to say there's something wrong with people's bodies? You don't think there's something really evil connected with flesh, do you? But she tried to explain that. And I remember one time I was going along a road right after I was saved up in Maryland, up around Pennsylvania, North Maryland, and somebody, unsaved person, walking along there, joking, laughing about this and that and the other thing. And so aren't these Dutch barns quaint? Notice these little, I'm talking about something up on top of the roof. These little things look like lightning rod on top of the roof. And they laugh and say, that's to keep, that they put those up there because that would keep demons out. Isn't that silly, Dr. Ruckman, demons? And then you say something, and then you're a weirdo, see? I mean, you're a kook. I remember another time, right after I was saved, one of my old buddies came to see me. All my buddies before I was saved were Italian Catholics. They were Nick Trelizzi and Joe Bertini and Joe Zaza and Tony Bertini and all that. Then as soon as they got saved, they were all German Protestants. It all kind of switched over. And I remember right after they got saved, one of those old fellows, his name was Aloysius. I was walking along with him, and he said something when I laughed. And he said, good thing I said, I'm glad to see you haven't lost your sense of humor, see. They always anxious to know that there's no difference between you and them, see, so they can still feel at ease. And so, thinking I had my sense of humor about me, which I still did and still have, and some of the brethren will never forgive me for. I he thought I had my sense of humor, so he told a real dirty joke, see? One of those old ones. And he just laughed, I didn't do anything. I just walked along with him and said, don't you get that? Don't you get that? That's I get it. He said, what do you think about it? And I said, well, the abundance of man's heart his mouth speaks. And he said, oh, that's pretty good, isn't it? And so I lost that buddy. And I think in about 3 weeks, I lost all the buddies I had. I didn't have anybody. There's old Pete Chikini down here used to drink beer with. And he came out of the radio station, let's go and have a drink of beer. I said, okay, be right with you. Checked up and everything, and just routine. And I walked on out the place there, and before I went out, I said, come here. I took him back in the record room of the radio station. I said, you ever get saved? And he said, what? I said, you ever get saved? He said, what's the matter, you Ruckman? What's the matter? I said, nothing. I said, you ought to get saved. I got saved. Boy, it's great. You ought to get saved too. And began to back on that counter and he said, you're getting religion. You're getting religion. And I said, I haven't got religion. I got salvation. And he went out that back door. That was the last beer he ever asked me for. I'll tell you, when I got saved, it cost me some lifelong friends. That's what he's talking about. You remember some of that? Some of you still have. That's one thing wrong with a lot of Christians. In this church and every church, they still got too many of their old friends. You could have bust off some friendships. I made some remark over there one time about I make enemies on purposely. One of our finest Christian gentlemen, a real saved man, he loved the Lord, went out the door and said, just can't understand that fella. Just can't understand that fella. Why would he say a thing like that, Because it just never occurred to him that you ought to have enemies. And brethren, I'll tell you, down in truth, you should have some good enemies. And if you don't have any good enemies, you're sorry. That's right, brother. That's right. If you don't have any enemies, well, even Lyndon Johnson's got enemies. Yes.
I have an enemy. I hear a fellow on the radio this afternoon come back about something. Called my picked up fellow and called that fellow kind of like his uncle was. And he said to the house, and his uncle was concerned, nobody can get along with him. Said the wife came in one day and cooked his eggs. He said, how you want the eggs? He said, crown them all out and fry them. Everybody said, oh, all right. He looked at him and he wouldn't fry them wrong.
Two, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of God. Notice the will of God again. It's all through here. And every time it showed up so far, it's been suffering. And every time it's showed up so far. That he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh, like you were before you're saved, to the lust of men, that was your end, but to the will of God. For the time past of our life may suffice us. It's sufficient. He said before, you ought to have your full of it. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. Peculiar thing for Peter to say, he was a Jew. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. I don't know why he says that if he's writing the Jews. Jews didn't wrought the will of the Gentiles at all. For the time past of our life may suffice to have wrought the will of the Gentiles when he classifies himself, walked in lasciviousness, that's any kind of sex sin, lust, that's any kind of coveting or desiring something you don't have, excess of wine, too much wine drinking, revelings, that's all-night parties, banquetings, that's a big gluttonous feast, and abominable idolaters. And that shows Simon Peter, although he was a Jew, must have had a pretty rough life, because he was a fisherman. You commercial fishermen, you know how commercial fishermen are. That's a rough crowd. It's a rough crowd. For wherein they think it strange, you run not with them to the same excess of riot. Riot, that's civil rights demonstration. These new Bibles try to change that so you can understand it. I understand that word means. Riot. The excessive riot, speaking evil of you. All right? The old crowd invites you to come back, and then you don't go back. And then they speak evil of you. They say, well, something's wrong. Well, you got something in for me. I know what the trouble is. Or say, well, he's a fanatic, you know, he's crazy, well, he's off-center, well, he's eccentric, well, he's hard to get along with, well, you can't talk to him, you know, and all that kind of business, and a slander you. And some of you folks that have been in high society before you got saved probably seen more of that than I have. I wasn't in high society before I was saved. But the old crowd that dropped me off were all the bootleggers and run runners and all the old dance band boys and all them. But I tell you, it really goes through this as a Christian and a cultured crowd. The persecution there is worse than it is down lower. Because down lower, you just get in a fight and make up, you know, you don't fight. But the cultured crowd, the society crowd, they can be just as nasty and just as slimy and slick as a two-tongued snake. And they're that kind of business, you know, come to the party and, where were you, darling? You know, that's it. We missed you so much. Well, we thought you'd come, you know, and then kind of poke around to find out why you didn't get there, you know, and go out of the room and, you know, psychiatrist, you know, that business. That's how the cultured crowd does it. And they speak evil of you, and they think it's strange you don't go with them the same thing. They say, well, darling, you should have come in to dance tonight. And there's a big country club thing out here. All the best people are going to be there. You're sure not going to miss it. Well, no, thank you. Well, what's wrong? You have a headache? You sick? No, I'm all right. Well, are you going to be out of town? Well, you just must be there. That kind of business. That's where they are in that crowd. And that thing can really get rough, eh? Said they a couple of years ago, they invited some girl here in church to go out on a beach party or something. No, she's going down to a street meeting. Won't you know they thought she was a kook? Wherein they think it strange you run not with the same excessive riot, speaking evil of you, who shall give account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead. Or they'll give account for that business. Speaking evil of you, who shall give account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead. Two resurrections. Judge the quick, first resurrection, and the dead, second resurrection. For this cause, judging the quick and the dead, for this cause was the gospel preached to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. Next verse, 7. But the end of all things at hand. That's the tribulation indication. Indication is the tribulation reference. But the end of all things at hand, be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer. And above all things have fervent, fever, warm. Have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. That is, as far as God is concerned, where there's real love, then the Lord will tend to be lenient. And I'm not saying God will wink at sin or overlook sin or not with you for your sins. But the first thing the Lord is concerned about, as I told you 1,000 times, is that heart condition. And with that heart condition, loves God, number one, and loves neighbor as itself, number two, that'll take care of an awful lot. That'll take care of an awful lot. And when those two things aren't taken care of, you won't be able to get by with nothing. All right, 9. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. That means, well, look at a hospital. Our word hospital comes from it. And it means taking care of somebody. Hospitality is to open the door, invite them in, and take care of them. Our word hospital comes from it. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. See? I mean, it's one thing to invite them in and take care of them to get a vote from them. One thing to take them in, invite them in and take care of them in order to get a raise in salary. And one thing to take them in and take care of them in order to impress them. And it's another thing to take them in and take care of them because you love them and want to help them, see? So without grudging. Use hospitality one another without grudging. This meeting or whatever word it was the other night, Deacon went through the usual thing. It went for about an hour and 15 minutes to cut me down in the third person. You know, Brother Ruckman is this and Brother Ruckman is that, you know, and we sit at the table. I looked out the window, ate some cookies and drank some lemonade. And it went through all that, and the gist of that thing was this horrible, bad, wicked, vicious man severed himself from these fellows, and wouldn't a man be reconciled with them and cut off fellowship with them. And when it was all over and going out the door, I turned to those fellows and said, you fellows are just lying about that now. You're not telling the truth about that. I'd come to any one of your houses an invitation, I turned to Brother Williams, I said, when's the next meal? When do we eat? And he said, well, there's more to it now. I said, when do we eat? He never did give me an invitation.